July. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for joining, everyone who's watching, and also to the beautiful ladies that are with me on this broadcast, our new venue, online, live, instead of in person. So, excuse any hiccups, but good to see you guys virtually.
Good to see you guys virtually.
Oh, you got your hair did. I didn't mind to. I didn't mind to. I scrubbed.
Welcome everybody. Yeah, give it a few, just a couple minutes before we officially introduce, because it takes it has a little delay. Okay.
But this format actually works. I like this.
Yeah.
It works. Yeah. I'm not gonna tell anybody I have on boxers, but
I have on yoga pants. Just
yeah.
I'm just kidding. Kimmy, you have on booty shorts.
Little bit.
All right. I think it's safe to do introductions.
We good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. So today's show is language and culture, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today to have this discussion. I think it's going to be a pretty profound discussion covering how we speak, the language that we use, the words that we use, and how that affects how we interact with each other. I think it's kind of important considering the where we are right now as a society. You know, I think that one of the most base things, which is the way we communicate, is often overlooked. But we're going to tackle that.
Yeah. What's your name?
My name?
Yes.
You know me. I'm Sean Spalding, and
I'm Shauna Whittingham. Welcome. And
Kim Bancroft, hello.
all right.
again, thank you guys for joining us. This is our first time doing all of this virtually, so we're not in the same room together. So we're practicing safe distance. This is really long distance, but yeah. So thank you for joining. So again, about the intersection of language and culture, there is a common thought that is language affects how we think, and we wanted to delve into that today to see how we speak in terms of, you can see how Shauna is dressed. You see you dressed like you're at work, right? Yeah. Now let me ask you something. Do you change your diction? Do you change how you speak based on who's listening, based on the people you are around, based on the environment? You know, they call it code switching, which that has an even deeper meaning, but similar.
Absolutely, 100%, hands down. Especially being an immigrant coming from another country, where I grew up speaking the dialect patois. It's the Queen's English, but it's interesting because even there in childhood, you know, I spoke one way among my friends. At home, I spoke a different way in terms of the accent and including the language. There were things I would say to my friends that I would never utter out loud in front of my parents. But fast forward, coming here to the States from a tertiary level education, I was a very outspoken child. But when I came to college in the United States, because I had an accent, even though I was speaking the Queen's English, professors and instructors, I remember this one woman saying to me, "I can't understand you." So yeah, you put on a little twang when you're talking to Americans.
Right.
I had some colleagues that I used to sit within close quarters, and whenever like a Jamaican broker or consultant would call me, I didn't even notice this, but when I would hang up the phone, Kimmy, it was our days together, when I would hang up the phone, people would say, "Oh, were you just talking to Dennis Charlie?" And I'm like, "How do you know?" Like, because you talk completely different when you're talking to a fellow Jamaican. So absolutely, Sean, hands down, yes.
Yeah, I think if we really take the stock of how we interact throughout the day, I don't think anyone can escape that. So that leads me to Kimmy. How do you change how you communicate with people, or do you think you don't?
No, I absolutely. I couldn't hear I think you said code language or
Code switching is what I was referring to earlier. But code switching has a connotation in the Black community, which is you change how you speak, like, "Hey, what's good? What's happening?" Versus when you're at work and saying, "So, based on these findings, how we're going to proceed," that kind of language.
right. I've never heard that term, so I want to know more about where that.
That's one version of code switching. There are others, but that's one.
But no, I'm originally from Philadelphia. I understand, like, when I'm back in Philadelphia, if I'm talking to my family, I am very much one that slips back to a deep Philly accent. I learned quickly that when you're down here in the South talking to certain people, it doesn't translate as well, or you're judged a certain way, or it just doesn't sound, appropriate, professional. So I actually at work have to slow myself, make sure I'm not slipping back to my Philliness.
Yeah.
You are judged on how you speak. When you threw this topic out, I thought, oh, interesting, because we tend to think about appearances. We talked about like dress and hair and how we're so judged, on appearance very quickly. But when you threw language out there, I was like, you know what? I haven't really thought about that, but I do know my own personal experiences. I've had to overcome that. Just with my own dialect from being from Philadelphia. But I do think that there's another layer of, there's an accent, but then there is also what's perceived as just improper English, right? And who's determining what's proper, what's not, I don't know. But there is definitely, I know, a judgment when you hear people, what's good, or it does start to drift towards, folks are going to be judged if they are speaking in their own, slang, with folks that maybe aren't speaking that.
Yeah, I completely agree. For me, I believe there's a stigma attached to the way we speak and the words that we use, rightly or wrongly. There is a stigma that's attached to it. If
what about you though, Sean?
Sorry?
What about you?
Well, I can say categorically that I change how I communicate based on who I'm around. No holds barred. I do that on a daily basis. So if I'm on a business call, I am definitely going to change my cadence, how I speak, the words that I use, just because of the environment that I'm in. And that has been, I'm 48 years old, so this has been, it's almost like muscle memory. So I have developed this way of speaking. It can be, my wife is not, she's not Jamaican, she's Haitian. So I'm not surrounded by people speaking in a Jamaican tone or Jamaican accent daily, right? But she will point out to me when we're speaking, and then sometimes I'll be on a phone call and I'm talking to a friend, and she's like, oh, it's amazing. Like, you call on the phone, you speak different. Come on, you go back on the phone, you speak completely different. And I don't realize that I'm doing it. And that used to be mocked. I don't know about Sean if you noticed that, but that used to be mocked years ago. People used to be like, "Oh, you're twanging, or you're switching it up." But for me, first, I don't see anything wrong with it. Secondly, I don't think I don't see there being any way around it, simply based on what you said, which is sometimes I've been in situations where I'm not speaking patois, I'm not speaking flat, or that colloquialism. Right, I'm speaking as you said.
English, right?
What people say proper English, right? But I take objection to proper. But anyway, the proper English, and they still don't understand. So you have to change and just.
And so there's another dynamic to that. Something for you guys. Do you know that cows moo differently throughout different parts of the country and the world? Like how so in the Southern America they have the drawl. I forget what the terms are, but just like how their accents all throughout. Let's just focus on the United States.
Yeah.
You're not going to get away from demonstrating this. You know that.
No, don't do that to me. Moo, moo.
But aren't we kind of, I mean, we talked about this. Aren't we kind of tribalistic in I don't know if it's natural, but the reality, right? We've talked about, we kind of congregate, you know, with like folks, or we naturally vibe with people we feel connected to, or have more things in common, or can share experiences. And so doesn't dialect almost become part of that?
Absolutely. And even interestingly, we as humans have dialect, animals have it, even nature has it. I went for a run the other morning, and you know, this hurricane that was coming through, I swear to God, all the birds were heading southeast. And so they were, because the storm it wasn't even out west yet, but it wrapped around and was coming from out west. Like the trees talk to each other. I know this is where you're trying to go, Sean. You're probably like, what the hell is she talking about? But the point is, the entire universe has a community. I mean, if you think about the Aborigines in Australia, you know, and this kind of, you guys know I'm a yogi, so it all goes back to the universe. And I piss Sean off every time I say this, that we're all knowing beings, that you almost don't have to ask me a question, because if you stay quiet enough, you realize you already know the answer. Wow. Aborigines can tell you when they know when they're going to die, because they're that in tune with the earth, with themselves, with their surroundings.
What it sounds like what you're saying is that we don't need language?
No. I mean, language is something we came up with to more effectively communicate. Absolutely. And we do, you know, so I would love for you to share some examples that you were sharing with Kimmy and I yesterday. Yeah. About even the same word meaning something different depending on who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, or what language you speak. But going back to what you're saying about communicating, because that's the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about language, is being used as a means of communication. But my thinking, and I'm not by no means a linguist, but my thinking is that language is more of coming out of a means of thought rather than a means of communicating. Because if you try and think about the dream that you had, or the last dream that you can remember, try and describe that in your head. Don't even speak. Try and doing that in your head without the use of language. Try doing that. I mean, try to do anything without the use of language. It's primarily a means of thought before it becomes a means of communication.
Right.
So I say that to say that it affects the way we interact, you know, with each other. So going back to what you're saying about some examples, we're talking yesterday about the way that language can affect how we move throughout the world. There is and it's easy. Anyone can look this up. There's an Australian tribe, I think it's Hopi, if I'm not mistaken, Australian tribe, that they use direction based on cardinal direction. To describe where things are, to describe positioning, versus the way we use it by saying the desk is to the left of you, or the desk is to the right of you, or it's in front. If you ask them, they will say it's to the north, or it's to the southwest, or to the northeast part, you know, in their language, but that's how they're describing it. So you could spin any member of this tribe around in a circle. They might be dizzy, but they can always orient themselves as to where they are on the earth, right? So, and that starts from a very young age. And so their spatial reasoning is much more advanced just by virtue of language than ours is. So that's one way that it changes the way we think. Because if I asked you no to point in the direction of southeast, you'd be hard pressed. I don't believe it.
Not me. I always know whether I'm facing I must belong to that tribe, because I always know whether I'm facing north, south, east, or west.
Okay.
Always. As a matter of fact, I feel disoriented when I check and I feel like I don't know. It's like I need to know.
Yeah.
If you make a concerted effort to realize where you are in relationship to north, south, east, west.
All the time.
Okay.
Every time.
Okay, because I don't. But then that's probably why I get in fights with my wife, because I don't know where we're going. But go ahead, Kimmy.
It's interesting because when you were first talking about the directional things, there's sort of an egocentrical aspect to it that you had brought up, where I thought it was, because I grew up knowing east my directions, north, south, west. That's how I gave directions. My grandfather was very important. Like, it was important to know your surroundings and how to get somewhere if you needed to go somewhere. And as I can remember my grandfather mocking people because he'd say, you're going to head north or west here. And they'd say, well, I'm making a left or a right. And he'd say, well, it's not a left or right. I don't know if you're coming from the south or you're coming from the north.
Well, yeah.
Where you're coming from. And he would always get so frustrated. Like, how do people not know or sense of direction? And it really is connected to, do you view it as like, where am I? My body, right? Or is it like, this is our land, this is our area, this is our community, and it's there, right? And do you know how to navigate that? And it's kind of just a different perspective of if you're just thinking about directions.
Right. Or how about it? Well, Kimmy, you might be able to relate too, but don't ask a little country boy or country girl in Jamaica for directions. It's where's the shop or where's so-and-so house? Go up the hill, go around the corner, and then after to the brown cow, and then go like this, and then you go straight for a long time.
Very true. That's very true.
And then you go like this. I mean,
down the street.
So that goes back to language, and even the way we communicate with each other, express ourselves, give directions, give advice. I mean, any type of communication, it really is reflective of like your community. If you're in an area where roads are windy and they're not clearly marked, then yeah, you do need to rely on landmarks. If you're in a city where streets are on east and west and are numbered, it's a different conversation. But I do think that for whatever reason, dialects and languages and the way people are communicated, people are judged differently and held to different standards.
And so are words.
He was an elitist in that he felt he was, a higher intellect because he could speak to directions.
You brought up about the whole elitist view of how you what the language that you use or the words that you use or how you communicate. Because I want to go back to Shauna, what you were saying earlier when we're asking about if that the whole code switching and speaking and communicating differently based on who you are around. And on 2 occasions, you said the Queen's English, denoting an air that speaking a certain manner of English is
proper.
Is proper. Yeah, or more favorable than speaking a more colloquial version of
language. Right. No,
so,
you're right. But then words too, right?
Yeah. But why do we do that? If we recognize that there's a tribalistic instinct to communicate and create your own language, in modern times, like Yiddish, derived from wanting to have your own language, you know what I mean? And so we recognize that's natural. We recognize it's human nature, but then we judge.
Yeah.
So here's something I want to throw out to you guys. Jacob Blake, who got shot in his back 7 or 8 times a few days ago, walking away from police holding on to his shirt. He is going into his car and they shot him in the back. So I'm listening to the news report about this either this morning or yesterday. And you talk about language, the way the news, the words that you use tell different stories, even within the same community. So listening to Jacob Blake's story in the news or on NPR, wherever I was listening to it, they said when Jacob was reaching in the car. So not getting in the car, not trying to get away. If you use the word reaching, what are you telling in that story? You're suggesting that he is going for a weapon, almost justifying the police firing his gun 7 or 8 times in a man's back. You know,
like you're attaching an intention to the verb. He's reaching in, but the way you're describing it is though, if I'm reading it correctly, is though he was reaching for it to do something with it.
Right. All they say is the word reaching. Jacob Blake was reaching in his car when police unloaded their weapon in his back. Just that word reaching.
Yeah.
That tells a completely different story, in my opinion. In my opinion, that tells it that suggests that he's a threat.
Yeah, words have meaning, and they are definitely used as weapons. We know that, you know, when we fight with people, but they can be used to spin or insinuate. And we know it. I mean, we've talked about it. The media, they want to grab headlines. It's all in the words and the language and in the way in which they present something.
But we do it ourselves too, no? Because if I came in a room and said, you know, she be working, all right? What am I saying when I say that? What translate for me what I'm saying? She be working, meaning what I'm trying to say is she is working in a perpetual manner. She stays working, right?
But the way you said it too, Sean.
Yeah, well,
the words, but where you put the emphasis.
Yeah, but that's true for many languages. It's always about the tense and the you know, how you emphasize what you're saying. No, if I said she be working, or if I said she working, meaning she's working right now, versus she be working, meaning she's working in a perpetual state. 2 different things, and that's brilliant. And that some people would call it phonics, but that's a use of the word be in the African American lexicon that is not possible in regular English.
True.
It's brilliant. It's a very sophisticated use of that tense. No, if you ask somebody else, they would say that's horrible English, but that's ridiculous because that's a silly argument.
It still conveys a message that everybody around you understands.
Actually
conveys a message more efficiently.
So I will say, I don't always like if you say she be working, right? I don't know that, or she be working. Like, I honestly thought, like, when you said she came in the room and I was like, she be working, I was like, she's working the room. You know, like, I don't always necessarily understand.
Yeah, context is everything. Context is everything.
Yeah.
But I can just use those 3 words regardless of the context and you would get it.
Yeah, or like, okay, then if you, but just from the ear, I don't always know the intent of what is being said. I don't even understand my 9-year-old half the time. He's on YouTube.
Yeah, they speak a completely different language.
They're saying things like, I don't know.
And we won't, I don't think we have time for this today, but they speak a completely different text language with the emojis and the like.
But
like
just
you send an eggplant nowadays. Like, I didn't know what that was. I'm like, when since everybody liked eggplant? You know?
I knew that.
We're talking about eggplant?
And I knew that one, Shauna.
Now I know what it means. Now I use it, but sometimes it takes you a minute to get hip to the game.
I don't know what the pear is. What is the pear? I was seeing that on a bunch of things, and
that's bottom. That's booty. The peach.
I messaged them.
Peach. Peach is ass.
And they didn't respond.
So let me ask you something. The way we communicate now through text, do you think that is eroding language? Because there are people that believe that. Because we're almost like we're dumbing down language.
We're just going back to the Egyptian days where they drew. Modern day Egyptian.
Yeah, emojis could be considered a form of hieroglyphics.
No, but I'm not even talking about the emojis. I'm talking about how we structure language in our text. Because sometimes I'll write you instead of YOU. sometimes I phrase things differently because I'm emulating how I speak, just for ease of typing or just for rapidity.
Here's my position. If you're texting, which I don't particularly, I guess I'm still old school, so I tend to write out words. I mean, I'll do things like okay, I'll put okay. And if it's a long text and I'm trying to say people, I'll say people, PPL. However, if you're writing a letter or an email or some kind of document, I will not, I don't like that type of shorthand, if you will.
So Shauna, okay, because now we're getting back to what I think where we started, where it's like we change ourselves up, right? We adapt to text with a buddy. Now I'm doing a work email. And so I think I want to, so Sean, you mentioned or asked, are we eroding language? But who's to say what is proper, not proper? If you go back, like I try to read poetry and books, I don't even understand what they're saying half the time.
Yes.
If you go back in the day and read, and it's like, so yes, language has changed over time, but who's to say, like, what is eroding? Are we still communicating? Can I still get my point across? Does it matter if it's formal or the old way in which things used to be said?
I guess the true measurement is, are people understanding you? Because to Sean's point earlier, some forms of Ebonics makes the language or interpretation thereof more efficient. So I guess the answer to your question, Kimmy, is your audience understanding you or not?
So
to carry your question even further, there is a hegemonic component to language. I mean, it is a tool of dominance, and it is a sign of dominance, even probably more importantly, because if you look at the dominance of English in the world, if you really want to increase your earning potential, regardless of where you live, you need to be fluent in English, right? But that wasn't always so. Before it was French, right? That was a language of diplomacy. That was a language of
Mandarin is the fastest growing language today.
I'm sorry?
Mandarin is the fastest growing language today.
Well, the funny thing with Mandarin though is that there are more people it's a fastest growing language, but in terms of income potential by knowing a language, English is still far ahead of all of them. You know what I mean? Like people will cite that, well, there are more people that speak Mandarin that speak English, but that's just because China has such a huge
ratio. Number, right.
Yeah. But like I was saying, before English, it was French, and before French, it was Latin. As a matter of fact, at the time of the French Revolution,
that was the base.
Yeah, that was the base. If anybody is like myself was coming, I grew up in the Catholic faith, and I was an altar boy, so I remember hearing. I mean, I didn't understand Latin, but I remember having to say certain things. I remember the father saying certain things in Latin. I can remember that. But it's also peculiar that I don't think a lot of people realize that at the time of the French Revolution, only 25% of France actually spoke French. The bulk of the people that lived in France actually spoke Latin or Gaul. They didn't speak French. It was Richelieu that opened up the Académie Française that was meant to standardize French and to uplift the language and make it dominant in the world as the empire grew. And then you know what happened after that, with the British Empire growing even more, English became dominant. So language has, there's a hegemonic component to language. So going back to what you're saying, yeah, who's to say, well, they said history is written by the victor. So you're living in history, and that's who is making that determination.
It's interesting. I have thought about language as a tool to make a population feel unified or better, bigger, stronger than another set of right. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I know myself, I've judged, people, but I've never thought about it in totality like that. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the even going as far as to how we apply gender, right? But there's a big deal now as far as the use of pronouns, and a lot of people are getting hung up on that and saying, "Jesus, it's either Mr. or Mrs. It's either Sir or Madam, or right? It's either male or female." But
changing as binary.
exactly. So based on what we know in science now, it's not that simple. But language has made us believe that, as you said, it is binary. It's one or the other when it really isn't. It's much more fluid, right? So our language has to adapt to our increased knowledge, our expanded knowledge of science. So everything intersects. As a matter of fact, it's speaking about back to gender in language. We were talking about this yesterday with how different languages look on different objects, like a bridge. Like in Spanish, a bridge is it's masculine. In German, bridge is feminine. But in Spanish, it's masculine because it's firm, it's sturdy, right? And that's what they associate with masculinity, right? Yeah, take that for what it is. I mean, you can see how culture intersects there, right? I mean, I'm sorry, not French. In German, they look at the bridge as an elegant display and an elegant structure with its lines and so on and so forth.
And that's interesting because when I think of bridge, like I would think it could be either gender because I consider it like a connector. We're connecting over here to over here through a bridge, and that could be any gender. But I see what you're saying as far as how it's viewed because of the various languages.
Well, and
in Spanish they do that a lot. Oh.
The entire Spanish language, there's masculine and feminine, and so I'm like thinking through this, like how did that even happen? Like what even drives people to say we need a male way to say it and a female way to say it? Like why? Like I don't know. But
well, I would believe again. I don't know, but I was thinking about that. Why was there a need? But if you think about, try to forget everything we know about what is politically correct and what is right or whatnot. We started from somewhere and we slotted people into certain descriptions and certain ways that they fit into life, right? So all we saw were either male or female and younger, and so there is a designation for age also. Right.
What do you guys think about a name, like the naming convention of people? So do you believe that, just like how we're asking if language affects culture and society, do each of you believe that what you name a child matters in terms of their success or experience in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just go back to what we've been talking about is, or what I feel is that you are absolutely judged, and we've talked about trying to get jobs, like we could take gender, we could take ethnicity off of a resume. Your name is still going to be on the resume, and there is still very much this gap in how we're naming our children, and I do believe that ethnic or exotic or a different name does somehow differentiate and make somebody think twice about that person. And you may never have even met them. And
it's just
conversation, but that does drive a predetermined judgment. Or do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. How the kids just went back to school. She's your cousin, and Sean, you know her too, Renee. I think it's Renee O'Connor. I think she had a meme where it said, "Parents, when the teachers need your email address, make sure it's not like sexy gal, brown, pink."
Everybody had that one email address that they had to change, right?
It just made me think of that, Kimmy, when you talk about the judging. But what about you, Sean? What are your thoughts on what we name.
Well, yeah, I think it does. It does have an effect. That's the world that we live in. Just like race, people always say, "Well, race is a social construct." Yeah, well, that may be, but that's the world we live in. Race exists. We do place people in those categories. So yes, but someone based on the name or the how you name your children, yes, it will have an effect because it's been shown. Whether and also going back to language again, how you speak on the phone, that also has an effect on how you're interpreted. So yeah, I think all of that plays a factor. I wish it didn't, but there's no escaping the fact that it all plays a factor.
So here's where my mind is. Like, for example, you have a son, right? You have a son and you decide, I'm going to name my son Sean. And then
she's talking about
Sean. Huh?
I'm kidding.
And I'm like, Sean, what if you have another son? What are you going to name him? And so here's what I've not done any studies, nor have I read any studies. I'm sharing with you what I have witnessed firsthand. So you name one son your name, okay? They grow up proud, want to be like you. You're an upstanding citizen. You're a wonderful father. You work hard to provide for your family. Now you have another son, and you name him something else. I have witnessed the son that you name after you is who excels, versus this other son that now you've given a different name. I'm also going to tie that into these nicknames that people call children and continue to call them when they go into adulthood. Let's say as a child they were calling you Shawnee. Right. And however old you are now and we're referring to you as Shawnee, that does something psychologically, in my opinion. It's like you never grow up. So when you're talking to me about your adult brother and calling him little Sean.
Well, I think you need to talk to my mother about the whole Shawnee thing. Maybe it did already. That's why we're talking about this.
Oh, no, I didn't know you. I've only known you as Sean, but then I've only known you as an adult. So,
yeah, but that, what you just brought up, could be fraught with many different ways to interpret that. Because if success is more likely with someone being a junior, there could be the case that the parent, whether male or female, the parent is taking an extra step because that's their namesake, right? Yeah. Maybe that's not outside influence. Maybe that's just within the household, and there's an extra dose of doting on that child because it's the namesake.
Exactly. The other children suffer though.
Yeah, there's a psychological aspect that's happening inside the home that could be a factor. But I will tell you, like, I'm Kimmy. Like, if you know me, I'm Kimmy. I refer to myself as Kimmy.
It's different for women, Kimmy. I'm sorry.
Well, I am not. I mean, it is not okay at work to be Kimmy, right? Because I've been on calls where a coworker who I'm very close with will have a client on the phone or someone outside the company. And he'll go, oh, Kimmy, Kim, and he'll refer to me as Kimmy. And then after the call wraps, someone else who was on the phone called him and said, you need to stop calling her that on the on calls. And he called me saying, like, I'm so sorry, I feel terrible. I said, I don't read anything into that. I am Kimmy.
Right, but somebody else did.
Can I be ageist?
Huh?
Can I be ageist here for a second and ask you how old is the person that pointed out that you shouldn't be referred to as Kimmy?
And he was an older man. I don't know his age, but in his mind, he was like, Kimmy sounds like a ditzy, it's unprofessional. Like, who's Kimmy? And I'm like, I am.
That's a perfect example of perspective. So because he's older, because
absolutely
he's into the more formalities in the way we communicate, then yeah, I can see that coming from him. But that 10 years from now, that nobody will be repeating. Nobody would even look at that. Even you just saying that a while ago, that Kimmy, it was frowned upon. I kind of took a step back because to me, didn't see a problem with it.
Yeah.
No, But I don't put Kim. I mean, I am Kim Bank, Kimberly and Kim, in my short signature. I would never put Kimmy in writing on a work document.
Because it's more of a term of endearment. Yeah.
And I'm Kimmy.
Yeah. I think in just verbal communication, to me, it's acceptable. I don't see anything wrong with it.
And you know, one lesson I never forgot, Kimmy, a lesson I never forgot. I was talking about rates to a client, and I'd used the term cheap. I've never forgotten this. And he said, never say the word cheap, because it does something to the mind. Think people will start to think that it's no good. It's Mickey Mouse. Even though Mickey Mouse is expensive, but and so I have this conscious thing in the back of my mind. I do not use the word cheap. I will say inexpensive or less expensive, but not cheap.
I've always known that just because of marketing, that there's certain terms that have that a certain connotation that you don't want to apply to a product or a service. But so we could even carry this even further, going outside of our different prejudices, and even start going into the commercial aspects of the way we use language also. But unfortunately, I think we're running out of time.
No, it is 7:40. Yeah. So I kind of want to go back to the words too. Remember that couple that brandished their weapons at the protesters? So I kind of got into it with somebody because, I mean, her argument, which is fine, I respect a different point of view, but the wording is so important. So she was defending the couple that were waving their guns irresponsibly at other human beings who I considered protesters. But then in the back and forth, she started referring to them as the mob. So if you look up the definition of mob, it is a group of people who are there to incite violence. So even though there were more people walking on the street, and the debate is not about whether they were on private property for the sake of this conversation, but there were more people walking on the street. And so here are two people with weapons with finger on trigger. Who is inciting the violence?
No, they're manipulating the situation with the words that they're choosing to use. I'm sorry, I'm moving this camera. I had to charge, but
that's okay. But I just struggle with that because I see it even in the racial issues and the social and the justice issues that we have today. You've seen it, Sean, where it is the same crime or the same situation. If it's a Muslim, he's a terrorist. If it's a black person, it's a thug. If it's a white person, it's a troubled youth.
Yeah, well, just take that one term, thug. I mean, I think that term has become an even bigger trigger these days than it was before, because every time the term thug is used, first of all, it's used in a pejorative. And that's fine. I guess that may have been the intention of the word thug. But it's always used to speak about, from what I see, to speak about young black males. That's how I see the use of the word thug. That's how I interpret it. Maybe might be because from the lens that I use, which is the only lens I have, right? But that's the way I see thug being used. But I understand thug to be a troublemaker, and troublemakers come in all shapes and colors and forms. But every time I see it being used, it's being used in that way.
So this is where I don't understand how we got to a place where I guess it's no different than our own judgments. I guess I really hadn't thought about language as a factor in all of this. But because I agree, thug. But when there's a white person who is doing similar things, acting the same way, maybe creating the same chaos or committing crimes, what words, right? Like, can you think of a word that you would associate? Like, you think we say thug and your mind went to a black man causing, a gangster, right? Do we even have words for like a white male in that who would fit that description?
I have some words. I can't say that.
I'll give, no, I'll give you, have you ever played Mad Libs where you fill in the words? You ever played Mad Libs? You guys ever heard of it? Okay, so we play Mad Libs here. So you could interchange thug with mentally challenged, right?
Right.
You could use the same. So we immediately know who each one of those distinctions, what they look like. We know what the mentally challenged one looks like. We know what the thug looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're being honest, I go even further back. Now, this is how pervasive language is. If you look at some of the founding documents of this country, like we hold men are created equal, right? Now that sounds great, right? Sounds great, but I cannot recall who was having this discussion. But when I remember, I'll put it in the notes. But I remember discussion where it came up that men we hold these two that men are created equal. That whole word being created equal is where the crux is, because it's saying that we are created equal. That doesn't mean that we are equal now, is what they were saying when that document was written. So in other words,
that was then. This is now.
So what they're saying is, if you believe in a higher power, we're saying that we're created on the same plane, but we evolve on different levels. We have different endowments, right? So we may have been created equal, but we are not equal now. You understand? So
yeah.
But when you're reading it, you don't realize that that's exactly what it's saying, and that's how
the devil in the detail.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, you have to listen keenly. I get very upset. I was sharing with a friend / colleague earlier today that there's so much information in books, and I'm very curious about those books behind you, Sean. You have to tell us a title of a few. But, the information is there. You just need to seek it out. I've decided that if you have the power to vote and you didn't vote, we are not having a conversation. You're not worth my time.
100%. But maybe time. Maybe maybe they will vote in November.
Anyway,
can we give that person a second chance?
Yeah, I think we give it as much chances as long as the poll we give it as much chances as we can get, because we need it.
With the way the state of the world is right now, like, make a decision and take some action. If you have the power to vote and you sit there and you don't vote because you either forgot or if you are not outraged, you are not paying attention. But anyway,
use your words.
So my
the words that are coming out of my mouth.
My other issue is, if you tell me you don't read,
we're done with them.
Oh my God, off with your head.
Off with you.
A lot of people like that. There are less people that read nowadays. Less and less.
Less and less. It's so sad. It's like cool to be uninformed or not connected.
Cool to be stupid.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't know when it became like okay to not be a reader. I don't know. But
well, also, now to bring up about not reading, my mind goes to the president. So why? But the way in which he speaks, one will lead you to believe that he's not a very well-read person, right? Now, let me carry it a step further. Do you think the fact that he holds that office and that office carries with it a lot of weight, right? The fact that someone like that was able to gain the office of the presidency and speak in the manner in which he speaks and be completely vacuous in his intellect, do you think that will have any effect on the country and how people view intelligence?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I can't remember what election it was. It had to have been it was before Obama. I can't remember what
Probably
it was.
Bush. That's when I decided we were losing our first world footing.
You killer.
No, but there was a candidate who was running and he was being attacked because he was a Harvard graduate, at master's. He was multiple degrees, Ivy League school, extremely well educated. And they were using that as a way to say he's out of touch with the people. He can't relate to you. They were using it against him as if it was a bad thing, as if somehow we should believe that somebody who is that educated could somehow not be a good leader. It was just, I was mind blown. And people really bought into that. There is a portion of the population that is resentful and mocks people's
I have to tell you,
pride
it's a
in
much
higher
bigger portion than we realize, and the three of us sitting here probably realize and that's very sad.
It's
Well,
crazy to me.
Well, there you go. Here's another word: elites. Elites. I don't know if you guys have not watched it, but I watched the DNC conventions last week, and I'm watching the RNC conventions because
Me too.
there's something to be gained from watching it, right? I don't want to give them the ratings, but there's something to be gained from watching. So I'm watching it, and I hear a lot of speeches using this term: the elitists, the elites in the coastal states, these elites, the elites in the media, this and that. What they're speaking of is a lot of times is they're talking about people that are, like you said, they're either educated or speak in a manner not befitting where they're coming from, right?
Yeah.
It just goes back to what you're saying about the way language is being twisted and turned on its head, because that didn't used to be a bad thing.
No, it becomes, everything is good, and everything has, pros and cons and good and bad. But elitists can be bad if you are feeling like you are superior or better than someone else.
If you're behaving as such, but not if you read books and speak proper English.
Correct. Somehow education has been tied to this. And so rather than the word holding true, right, it's become this bigger thing where now if you are successful, you're highly educated, and you have certain thoughts, you're somehow an elitist. And they're using it as a way to be further divisive between the two. So you're getting a bigger gap between the lower class, the upper class. It's another manipulative way to continue driving this wedge. Through words.
Yeah. I came up on this piece where it was just like a 4-minute segment or so, and the title was "We Need Another Trump." So no. Hear me out. He was correct. What he was referring to, he showed the parallel between the Trump campaign the first time he ran versus the language, the complete sentences, the information the Democrats were conveying. It came across boring. It came across to what you both were just saying, as far as they use that against them, and he showed snippets of the Trump campaign with the slogans or just the one-word bites, or so his argument, which I agree with because it shows the dumbing down of society.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big part laziness. Like, even though when I send an email, I don't send anything that they can't see on just one screen. I also bullet it. It's like you have to.
Well, people have become headliners
and make it simple so people will take the time. So going back to the campaign, his argument is, or was, the Democrats need a candidate, not stupid, however, that can communicate in a manner that the majority of American people will pay attention. It needs some excitement. It's sad. It's politics. It shouldn't require that, but it does.
Yeah. So I have a question, and maybe we can wrap on this, but if we realize that it's a turnoff for people if they're hearing, folks speak too proper too intelligently, and we're saying maybe we need to bring it down to layman's terms with our government, with the highest people in power. Do we think that we should expect those people to bend down and speak in a way to reach those that, you know, are more comfortable with that? Or should we be asking the people to be lifted up and become more informed, more well-read, more educated?
Well, I think that there's a difference between appealing to the common man versus being condescending. All right. So when you can do better, but you don't, you know, that does have an effect. I don't think it's right. I think there's a hypocrisy involved in exposing the whole American ideal of aspiring, the aspirational values of America, but at the same time saying that we need someone to speak like a Donald Trump, because no one is aspiring. He's not bringing about these aspirational values of the country.
Maybe I didn't articulate it well. It wasn't to speak like Donald Trump, but it was to have sound bites and some excitement in order to capture and maintain the attention of the majority of the American people. Certainly not speaking.
No, it's his style. It's the way he attacks people. He makes jokes. He pokes at people. People think that's cool, or that's like a, tough guy, or, they want to hear. I don't know why they want to feel.
I've heard.
But it goes back to that tribal. They maybe want to feel like that person talks like they talk.
Well, I've heard brilliant people not use, use very simple words or and be joking in their delivery, but what they delivered was brilliant. But that's not what he's doing.
No.
He's appealing to that the lowest denomination.
Yeah. Sean, what you're saying is, I think it takes great emotional intelligence to be able to speak and get through to a 5-year-old, and then a Harvard graduate, and the same, not literal 5-year-old, but the intelligence of a 5-year-old. And it's about assessing and understanding your audience in order to get through to them. It's time to wrap up. So any parting words, and if you could grab one of the books and just give us a recommendation before we sign off.
Books?
The library.
I don't know. Well, let me pull one that everyone's talking about. This How to Be an Anti-Racist. How to Be an Anti-Racist. That's a great book. Really good book.
I need to check that out.
Yeah.
Really good book. And if you want to understand about the where we're coming from, as far as Frederick Douglass, this excellent book by David Blight.
I see you have one there. Truman. Nice. Okay.
Yeah. David McCullough, he does really good biographies. Really good biographies. As a matter of fact, my favorite one is this one by Doris Kearns Goodwin as a biography on Lincoln Team of Rivals. Excellent book. Excellent.
Okay. All right.
Good ones.
So we'll see everybody back here in 2 weeks, Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Spread the word. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Anything else you guys want to share?
Yeah, watch your speech. Watch your speech.
You're going to be judged. You're going to be judged.
Bye, guys.
Bye.